had a lot of views.
Recording is on.
In the hundreds, sometimes in the thousands. Who knows?
But I mean, I'll just say, I mean, everything, I've looked at this a lot, and this is a small group. What is it? Sam Mitchell, Collapse Chronicles, I think is it. I don't know how many thousand it is, but it's just a few thousand viewers. Same with Black Bear News. Same with many of the other pundits. I mean, there's very few that get into the hundreds of thousands. And so it's a small group, and it's a good group. And I don't know that, how viral these ideas go would depend on people's seriousness, population appetite for really serious engagement. So it's a question. I'm just looking at Orium's comments here.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, if we can change the Overton window through an ARG, that would be amazing.
What is
if it moves in the right direction, that's amazing. But I don't know how to help with that. And
what is an Overton? What is an Overton window?
It's the theory of what gets attention. So things have to be in the Overton window to even get noticed. And if it's outside the Overton window, you have a much harder time getting it into public discourse. It's not impossible, but someone else might explain it more.
I think it's sort of what's acceptable for public discourse. So if it fits in the Overton window, it's suitable for mainstream media and the like. So actual radical ideas or anything outside of the mainstream would fall outside the Overton window. The frame.
With anarchism, in my own experience, and I'm also someone who's lived in a commune on 2 occasions in Kreuzberg in West Berlin before the wall came down. An actual functioning autonomen is the German phrase. Selbsthilfe, self-helping commune. So Kreuzberg, if anyone has experience there, Kreuzberg, West Berlin, in the 10 or 20 years before the wall came down, was another locus of, if you talk to people who've lived in those communes, it was like anarchism. The state left you alone because West Berlin at that time was only lived in by Germans crazy enough to want to live in the epicenter of a divided, garrisoned city. And most Germans didn't want to live there. And so only people taking an experimental view, and most of the successful squatted apartments in Europe were where they were eventually legalized only under, I think, Willy Brandt or Helmut Schmidt legalized them. And then the legalization movement stopped. And then, of course, the wall came down. But having lived in those, I mean, I'm getting to a point here where if I believed that it was possible, I'd be pursuing it. But when you have nation states of the size that we do, we're watching a nation state decide to crush and destroy another nation state, a fledgling nation state right now in Eastern Europe, a nation state that has rarely had moments of independence, but should treasure those and try and achieve those. When in Spain, you can have the best anarchist community around, but if you have a fascist state coming down on you, it's not clear to me how you survive. That doesn't mean anarchism isn't valid or good. It just means it gets erased quickly in a world of modern nation states. I don't have a solution for that, So, it is possible to be morally, ethically, and philosophically right and correct, but historically wrong and displaced and erased. And I don't have a solution to that. So those are some reflections on anarchism. It's time for truth telling here. I don't know if the group is prepared for these kinds of observations. It's the first time for me coming forward after having watched all of what Hugh has put forward. So I'm just offering these questions and observations. The challenges are enormous. Sorry. So
I think Hugh touched on this a number of times, the idea that you can't declare independence or something. You can't create this autonomous zone. I remember, I think I was discussing with him, but back when, what was it, maybe 2020, there's this place in Seattle where these people tried to form their own autonomous zone, and they tried to be officially recognized and all this stuff. And of course, the state just planted things inside of there and, fomented discontent and all of that inside of there, and then gave themselves an excuse to go in and eradicate it. But what Hugh would say, not necessarily as a solution, because it's an unsolvable problem, but as a way forward, was to play the game as you have to. So, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and then in all other ways that you possibly can, sort of resist internally, emotionally, whatever that might be. But you can't openly defy the state, because you'll just be completely crushed. So some kind of working alongside the powers that be and the system that does exist, and finding ways of playing the game without subscribing to the actual ideals. I don't know. It's very tricky, but the
I
idea.
I
Yeah.
think he wouldn't have exactly said that, but I think it was close enough. But he would have definitely said to do the right thing at all time. The right thing was very important, but also say to be small and micro in your protest if you can,
Mm-hmm.
which means that you don't go along with the system, but what you do against it, you do it quietly.
Right. Yeah.
Because
Exactly.
those protests that he constantly criticized from XR were it's just so ridiculous. Not just because they were non-violent, but also because we're faced with armies and police that are so much more powerful than, especially much more now than they were during the different uprisings that ourselves and our parents have seen. So instead of wasting your time in a direct opposition like that and a clash, better to undermine things in a much more covert and also precise way. And we talked a lot about bottlenecks and things like that in terms of activism, but I don't want to talk too much about this on the internet. But I think he would have said do the right thing, always do the right thing, and that's a big job. Yeah.
Yeah. No, definitely.
Hi, regarding the agenda, for the meetings, maybe we can have, a list of subjects and then a checkbox, and whatever you're interested in, you check it off, and then maybe Sophie can gather the information, and, everybody has their homework to do. We can do it like that.
That sounds good. And we could decide for next week and stuff like that. And we could start maybe putting up the meetings. I think, Bob, you were not there at the beginning of the meeting. I don't know if you heard, but maybe doing an alternate Eastern and Western, like 1 week Eastern and 1 week Western, until we feel the need maybe to have more meetings again. But at the moment, I think we all need to take all this huge news, and we have all some personal grieving to do. I think, and all of us, like because he was also playing the role of a teacher, bit of a guru, master, whatever you want to call it, but that leaves a big vacuum psychologically, and you have to acknowledge that. So we're not going to decide all of a sudden where the extinctionality is going to go, because it's an enormous shock.
Yeah, and he also said, be good like most of the time, like 98% of the time, and 2%, you can play with. I remember he said that.
I think those are all good ideas. It might be good to have Sophie's quite right. The agenda was driven forward by the immense, direction and momentum that Hugh had set forth, and the group sort of waited for Hugh to call most of the agenda items from either questions or threads or his own, what was on his mind. And to go forward, it might be helpful to have a Google Doc or whatever, some other public doc where people can, in the days leading up to each meeting, people who would like to suggest a topic be discussed can put it there, and whoever's moderating can group them or put them in whatever order. And if something comes up, and the group could kind of agree that those are the topic. That's the agenda. The agenda is sort of baked by the time the meeting starts. That's elementary, what do they call it? Social self-leadership. So we can do some variation on that.
That's a good idea. We're going to get that going, I'd say. Without forgetting that we still have to rebel and resist and not be defeated.
Well,
okay?
And not get targeted by the systems of cruelty that that Hugh was so good at identifying. But on the other hand, don't take it lightly. It is very serious business.
Yeah, and I'd really appreciate your participation today, because I think you've got a lot of things to teach us and to share with us. So I'd really like if you could continue to come along to the meetings, because I feel that you've got a lot to say.
Okay. Well, I will.
Really
I will try.
nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else to?
Anything else?
Before it's nearly an hour and a half. We look after the agenda for the next meeting, the dates in the coming week, and for this I will update you on what Lionel suggests for our little ceremony, and I suppose we all have to do it. I'm going to ask him something personal too, but I think we also could, as a group, could share, something nice, because we've done a lot of nice things together. There's no reason to stop now,
Oh, and I have one thing to add regarding the agenda. Maybe you could either post it, like a checklist, either post it, like send an email to everybody, or maybe post it on Reddit.
Okay. Yeah. And today, is there any topics, like the people that are here, because there was people this morning that there was not as many people actually, but is there anybody who has some ideas for topics offhand now, or do you want to leave it for after reflection? Because we were into the woo stuff, we were into info energy, we were at that stage when we were talking recently, and Hugh was center to this, and he was like the one man who was talking about this. So, do you want to drop that for the moment, or do you want to stay on that line of stuff?
I'd personally really like to do that at some point. Maybe it's something to kick down the road a few weeks, but I think that's imperative to understanding a lot. I see Orium says we should discuss how we feel about his concept of info energy. Yeah, I think that was clearly pretty divisive when he was introducing that stuff. But there's a lot to it, and a lot of different. I think I was saying this morning. There's a lot of different other perspectives on it that many authors and other people out there have shared regarding this. So yeah, thinking about it from a number of different angles is, I think, imperative. It's fundamental to your understanding of reality itself. It's critically important to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, I found it a pretty difficult topic, so I think it would be
Mhm.
really good that we dive into this again. Yeah,
There's
we
a
were
lot
at
to unpack in
the
it.
point where we
It
were
might be
anyway.
worth. Sorry, what was
Sorry.
that?
No, I said that's the point where we were, so we might as well pick it up where we left it.
Yeah, yeah. I was just saying it's a very complex and deep topic. It might even be worth splitting up into several different sort of subtopics, and then maybe break those up by week or something like that. But yeah.
I think that's we can pick it off from that from Hugh's last meeting, which was very
Maybe
it's a
it'd
lot
be
of
worthwhile to tell people to maybe go back and watch. I don't know which ones they were exactly, but to sort of refresh on that and see if we could try to pick up where it was left. But again, maybe this is something to push after we've had a couple of weeks of grieving or whatever, because it's it's a very deep topic.
Definitely, I would agree with that. Definitely worth having at least one whole session about the info energy. And am I right, Orium? It was related to. It was one of his riffs about the whole ufology stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we have that session, if people are interested, there is someone who some of you may have know about, Daniel Sheehan. So who here has heard of Daniel Sheehan or Danny Sheehan?
No.
Sheehan. All right. So who's Daniel Sheehan? And then, again, this is one of many things I wanted to have a discussion with you about, because I don't know whether he knew who Daniel Sheehan was. I suspect he didn't, because he never mentioned him. So who's Daniel Sheehan? Daniel Sheehan is a highly educated Harvard attorney, civil rights attorney. You can Google him. And he led the investigation into Iran-Contra and exposed that was a treasonous act. He led the investigation into the Karen Silkwood assassination. He has championed First Nations rights and lawsuits in this country, and many other things. And he teaches at Santa Cruz on and off. And the two institutes there's three institutes that he has, runs. The Romero Institute, named for Cardinal Arnulfo Romero of El Salvador, and the Christic Institute. And it was as the Christic Institute that he blew open the Iran-Contra affair. And it's amazing that he's still alive, first of all. But he, believe it or not, he also defended the Harvard professor who, John Hall or Johnson, whoever he is. He's a Harvard professor of either the psychology department or he's a medical doctor, who is the professor who had a number of patients who professed to have been abducted by aliens and who wanted to find out, well, what is the correct diagnosis of this mental illness? And he became convinced that these patients had really, that it must be true that they have been abducted because their stories are so similar. And he published a book to that effect. And the moment he published that, the Harvard department tried to fire him, tried to have hold hearings on that he was incompetent and that he was fraudulent and so forth. And Daniel Sheehan is the attorney who successfully defended him. And Daniel Sheehan has a worldview. He's the only other person I've heard use the word octave. You heard Hugh use the word octave, in fact, very recently in the UFO discussions, an octave of worldviews. And so Daniel Sheehan has a theory of this. And Daniel Sheehan believes that the eighth note of the octave, that each of the notes in Daniel Sheehan's world, the octaves are different worldviews that reflect different political ideologies and how you behave and what you will support. The different are you a monarchist? Are you do you support dictators? Those reflect different ways. Are you conservative? Are you liberal? Those result from different worldviews. And I'm summarizing very badly Sheehan's work, so I encourage you to read it or go view his videos. And he says that one of his agenda items is to prepare the world for the eighth octave, which is where we finally understand that we are not alone in the universe and we are prepared for full disclosure. So that's Daniel Sheehan. And at one point, Daniel Sheehan claims that he was shown actual materials, metals, and bits of vehicle that have no explanation, and that he was led down into a room and shown this stuff. Now, I'm not going to say where I stand on all of this, but he's the only other person who advances this kind of stuff, and he advances the notion that it is possible that the UFO reports are a form of psychic, that they've been imagined into existence by those who believe them. So very similar to what Hugh seemed to be advancing. So I'm sorry again for going on riff, but that would be something to bring to the table and ask questions about.
Yeah. Mhm. That would follow the meeting 95 Eastern meeting. I was listening to it again recently, today actually, on ufology, because it was a very clear meeting. And exactly, I think I remember using the word octave, and I didn't really understand what it meant. No.
Right.
Yeah,
John
yeah.
Mack, yes.
John.
And Oriam has pointed out it's John Mack
Mhm.
is the professor.
Mhm.
Now, my own feeling, I'll just cut to the chase. I mean, is the ufology. There is nothing more discrediting to anyone than to go public with a belief that there have been little men or grays or blues or foreign spaceships, alien spaceships landing on this earth. And so it is quite possible that Daniel Sheehan, and no one has advanced this publicly, and I don't think Daniel Sheehan has acknowledged, has even spoken about it. But what would you want to do to a Daniel Sheehan who's been so effective at penetrating and exposing and revealing actual corruption and conspiracy? And I would submit that it's, this is a percentage game. It's, in my view, it's an extremely high percentage that he was targeted for a staged exposure to some weird metals and some weird stories so that he would believe it and incorporate it into his own view of what he thought was true, and then promulgate it. And as a result, be taken seriously by far less people than otherwise. There's no way to prove what I just said, but that is what you would want to do to someone as effective as Daniel Sheehan. It hasn't completely, discredited him. He doesn't talk about it all the time, but, it's most people would assign him to the woo-woo end of things. So again, it's very risky or dangerous and ill-advised to be seen as promulgating that, because so why is it being naturalized? Why is it being floated into the Overton window? Again, a lot of people would say it is to naturalize further military expansion into space. We already were in space, but what better way to naturalize the creation of a space force and just the further militarization than to float this into the Overton window? And that's what's been done. I mean, it's all of a piece with that. And finally, there are actual people who have been charged with looking for signs of intelligent life in the universe. It's the SETI project. Richard Drake is one of the oldest and most prestigious members of that project. He originated the Drake equations. To my knowledge, Richard Drake does not believe there has been any encounter with any foreign intelligence or alien craft. And to my knowledge, none of the other reputable members of SETI believe that. And they would be the first, in my book, these people who've given their whole lives and careers to scanning the heavens and looking at radio telescope data and looking at a host of other data, as well as every UFO supposed sighting. If these people are waiting for it, they have been looking for it, and you're not hearing them say from their platforms that, oh yes, we now have encounters with alien life. So I would just put that out there as, stuff to think about if and when we review Hugh's material on this.
Talking about Hugh's material, I was told that his laptop was fished out of the sea after it was thrown in, and that it hadn't stayed very long. So I don't know anything about tech, but I asked his sister that maybe the hard drive could be saved, and she said yeah. And I don't know if the family is going to want it, but we could stay in touch and see, because there might be some stuff from, he was writing a book. He had a lot of, he had nothing on paper, nearly on the boat. So, and I was there, I've seen, honestly, it was just probably everything was online. So, or, on the computer. So maybe in the future, we don't know, we might get some material. We don't know what the family will do. That really, it's their domain to decide, and we can't tell them what to do. But yeah, he did some drawings, all right. Yeah, he did some drawings.
Sophie, you mentioned everything was pitched into the sea. Excuse
Not
me.
everything. Not everything.
Well, do we know why? Do we know what happened?
No, there was only a few witnesses that saw him go out for a swim, and then he came in and he got angry or agitated, let's put it that way, and that some things were flown into the sea.
Wow.
Yeah. So the fishermen, there was fishermen who was kind of used to see things falling off yachts, went straight away to pick up what was there and sort of salvaged whatever was thrown. His phone was too smashed to be saved. But so I don't know. Do you know yourselves, guys here? Can a hard drive after staying in the water can still be saved, or?
Depends.
Hmm.
As someone who does this professionally would have to use their arts and crafts to try and see, can data be recovered from it. Well, if it's a hard drive, if it's a disk drive or an SDD would be a question. But salt water is not good for
No,
Either
I don't
was.
think it would have stayed in it too long, but
Mm.
I don't know. Yeah. I see a question there coming up. Did someone? I don't know. People on this call, how many have read the announcement that Bob put on Reddit and has listened to what Mike said last week about what happened to Hugh? Because I know there's going to be all sorts of stories going around, but basically, the timeline is very simple in a way that we got cut off from him in the middle of a meeting on the 9th of February, and after that, it took 2 or 3 days for us to decide to call his family and the port authorities because we were worried because there was no internet activity, no phone, nothing. And the Sunday, we sent down a taxi to the marina, and the taxi reported that he was alive. And then we found out through the taxi driver that there had been episodes, whether they were caused by too much drink or stress or whatever it was, we don't know. It's all secondhand. But he had been agitated, angry, jumped in the water, a few things like that. Then on the Tuesday, we got a message from his sister to say that he had been talking calmly to the port authorities on his boat, but he didn't want to communicate and he was staying alone in his boat and locked himself in. And we heard on the Thursday night, my Thursday, which is Europe, that he had passed. In the meantime, after that, there was an autopsy that said he died shortly after midnight on the 17th of a massive clot in his lung, to put it simply. And he was cremated Thursday, which is the day before. What day is it today? Sunday, Saturday. Yeah, he was cremated Thursday, and his ashes will be scattered in the sea near where the place he loved, tomorrow morning. That's basically what we know. The autopsy result. There'll be a toxicology report that has to be done legally, but that takes ages in Greece, so that will come much later. And as far as we know, nobody broke into his boat, but the Coast Guards had to on the day they found him because there was no life on the boat. So they did get a paper to get onto his boat, and they found him. All right.
I have to ask, and I don't want to sidetrack the conversation at all, but do you know if he got jabbed? I know he was against it for a while, but
no, and there's absolutely no evidence that any. No, I honestly think he would have got it if he had to. He had no problems in changing and say okay, but I know we all think of that because of the clots, and I really
right,
appreciate the very long report that Jason did about this because it's true. Everything is true. We could imagine any scenario, and he might have got it. Maybe in a few weeks. We don't know because life is impossible in Greece without it. I mean, I have a sister living there, and she had to get the jab
right.
because she didn't even go and buy food. But maybe he would have got through with the new measures that are starting to. So I don't think so. I think he would have told us, to be honest. It was quite
He had
open.
mentioned well, I had seen he had mentioned it that he was vaccinated in the very
Yeah.
last
Was
episode.
that referring to that one? This
That's what
vaccine?
I
Or
don't.
referring
Yeah,
to
that's what I don't
general
know because he was
vaccination? Because he said his kids and him, he was not an anti-vax. So we probably will never know. I don't think we'll never know that.
no. I was
Family
just curious.
didn't find any record of vaccination on the papers, but who cares? He might have thrown all that. I don't know. He got rid of a few papers, but they found his passport after that. They found everything. It
Yeah,
was
it's just the first thing on my mind because the clots and not being all that old and
all the scenarios that were in your very comprehensive email, Jason, are possible. Everything is possible. But you're right to call it the boatman's disease. A lot of people who live on boats get clots, and that is a well-known fact in the medical world. There's not so much exercise. There's a lot of sitting and staying in the same position and all that added to lockdown and everything. It's true. It's a risk factor, and that's what probably happened, I'd say.
But what was he? I know you is not the place, Sophie, and you probably are still perplexed about it. What was the crisis? What was the emotional crisis? I think you'd agree. You're a doctor. I have looked. There's no mental instability caused by DVT or.
Yeah, there is.
There is. Oh,
yeah,
I did not see that.
No, but they can be in the days before. They can be a lack of oxygen from micro little clots, and they can be apoxia, and that can cause agitation and anxiety. But to be honest, I know, and I mean, I'm sure that because I have a funny feeling, because I think I'm sure he was drunk for a couple of days. I think he went on a bender after the Western meeting or that day. There was something I could detect because I know him a little bit. So, but that's not a cause of death, like do you know a marina where sailors don't get drunk sometimes?
No, of course not.
That could explain the big kind of maybe walking around and throwing things around, but that combined with an early, maybe he started to feel unwell. We never know that because he didn't talk to anyone.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I just think of the frustration that many of us who even live in cities and towns have had under COVID of trying to get a normal doctor's appointment. If you feel unwell and it's not COVID, you're on a very low on the list for getting an appointment. And if you're in Greece and you're unvaxxed in a remote port, I mean, it could have been that he was, I don't know, I'm purely hypothetical, but the number of frustrations that might mount, living portside and being restricted to the boat.
Absolutely. Yeah. But who knows, those things can start funny. They can be little signs that you wouldn't recognize. It's extremely difficult to diagnose sometimes.
I see. Well, I wasn't aware that mental.
Well, if you have a lack of oxygen,
cognition.
It can cause little.
I wasn't thinking. Yeah.
But it depends. If there was little clots starting to go in his neck or around those big blood vessels, that could cause it could trigger something, especially if you've had a few drinks. You would be more susceptible to that, and then it probably.
But I counted. I think it sounds like we count this as a COVID-related because of lockdown. I mean, nobody who's that restricted, nobody would be that restricted in their movement under normal times.
Yeah, but he used to go for walks. He used to go but he spent a lot of time on the computer the last while. The last couple of weeks, I think he was much more, or maybe 3 or 4 weeks, much more online than he used to be. There will always be a little shadow of mystery on all this, and so be it. Anyway, I hope everybody will remember tomorrow morning. That is, well, for me, the morning, which is probably around, I think his sister told me around 10 Greek, 8 UTC, that his ashes will be scattered in the sea. Just a little thought again for him there, I suppose, And his sister told me she would send me a picture that I will share with you. Oh, I see a message saying, a last email from C saying, oh, I would love to hear about that. I'm just finishing a bottle of wine before bed. Yeah, because I felt that at the weekend too. There was a little bit of wine and ouzo going on for the last couple of weeks. Started when we did when we did the ceremony against the machine, when we did the spell against the machine. It was very early in the morning and there was a bottle of ouzo on the table. and we were all sniffing our spirits, but he was drinking them. So, I was, yeah, yeah. But don't forget, Hugh has always taught us to be wary of the alien cortex, showing us, trying to bring us back to intellectualize and rationalize and explain and everything. We were just starting to see this. In myself, I know, but a lot of us probably under his guidance were starting to be aware of when this thing was clicking in and just trying to say, oh yeah, that's probably alien cortex. Well, that's his way of, maybe a Zen teacher would say, you're starting to see the bull at 2 or 3. But what I mean is that we were starting to be aware of that. And I think we need to continue that and not fall into the trap that is laid out by this thing that's cast, we have to let go and stop trying to explain everything, I think, at this stage.
Yeah, there'll be questions that'll never be answered. That's just a fact of the matter. Just about
but that
accepting.
happens a lot when people died, I think it's not just you. I think apart from obvious causes, but very often there's questions that go on and on and on and on for a long, long time. And it's part of grieving too. I could have done that. I could have been there. What if I'd go? What, and all that is just all the time happens when there's a tragedy, when there's a sudden death like that. He would have. I'm trying to imagine how he would react if one of us disappeared suddenly, and I'm trying to think what he would say and how he would go, and he would, and he would certainly not go down the way of too much analyzing and put it in a bigger picture and acknowledge the pain and the loss. It's there. It's big, big, big. Okay.
Okay. I think that's good. Anything? If there's nothing else, we can end it here. We'll take a moment of silence, as he would always do.
Let's pause.
Pause, yeah. Okay, and as he would say, I think I got it here, Om Paramat Mana Nama Iti. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks. So
Bye,
until next week.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Have a
Take
nice
care,
week.
everyone. Bye.